Welcome to YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline, your host for this segment of the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation-sponsored program where we highlight faculty, students, and activities at the Naval Postgraduate School. We've been running a segment on this particular show on military officers and naval officers who transition and continue to contribute to our national security. With that in mind, I'm also doing a special show on cooperation that the Naval Postgraduate School has with industry, usually through something called cooperative research and development agreements. Many universities do this, and NPS is not an exception. We do this with industries that are interested in national defense, such as Bluefin, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. And today, SAAB Defense and Security, United States of America, has sent us Commander Steve Benson, retired Navy, who now works for them and works closely with the Naval Postgraduate School in their research. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
You know, we have started off the last couple shows with learning a little bit more about you and your service in the Navy. So tell me, where were you reared and what got you interested in going to the great seas?
Well, I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. And one of the themes that goes through basically my entire career, military and civilian world, is that I just wanted to be in, near, or on the sea as much as I possibly could.
Is that right?
So my young life was spent as a swimmer. Competitively, I was in the water up at the St. Lawrence River in the summers. I went to college and swam. I was on the sailing team. I spent 22 years, and to quote Melville, Herman Melville, in most of the watery parts of the world. So, and I still, to this day, after having retired and moved back to Syracuse,
right.
Found it necessary to
return to
the sea again. And now I'm out here in Monterey, working with the school.
Right. So how did you get your commission? Where did you get your commission through?
Well, I graduated from high school, and I had the opportunity as a swimmer again to go to one of the finest prep schools in the nation for swimming.
Oh, really?
So the Naval Academy Foundation helped me do that for a year. And then I went into the Naval Academy and graduated in 1980.
Oh, fantastic. And what did you do immediately out of there?
I taught sailing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see we put you immediately to work.
Right. So
no,
that was
seas.
just a short time, but
okay.
But it fits the narrative here. I taught sailing and then I went on to ASW school and then to frigate.
Anti-submarine warfare.
Anti-submarine warfare. And then I went on to a frigate, a brand new frigate, commissioned out of Seattle.
One of our guided missile frigates,
Oliver Hazard Perry.
Sure.
I moved on to auxiliaries. I served in amphibs.
Well, no, auxiliaries. You have to explain that.
Auxiliary ships. So they're the ones that keep the ships supplied with all the things they need to do their work. So
right.
The battle groups, individual surface action groups.
So our logistic ships that support
the
those.
aviation groups
right.
that keeps them all moving and working. Yeah.
And so what did you do after that?
And so then I worked with the Marines for basically the last half of my career. I worked with the Marines all around the world and doing things that were, I think, fairly interesting.
Right.
And then I retired in 2002 and went back to Syracuse.
Ah.
And
Is that because that's your hometown?
That's my hometown.
Yeah.
And I went back there, and my family's from there, and I have a home there. And we had I had the opportunity to work for a company called Census Corporation. That company was a sensor company that did all ground sensor work. That was purchased by SAAB, which is a Swedish company.
Right.
And I was so overjoyed because the Swedish company that bought Census had an entire kit of technologies and capabilities that dealt with the water. Naval systems,
So
marine
actually,
systems.
you didn't go to work for SAAB originally. It acquired Census, is that it?
That's correct.
Okay, right. And you got into the aspect because of sensors and
Right, and it was in my hometown.
oh,
And-
okay, I see.
And then they purchased Census, and then I had a whole kit to work with, and a whole SAAB is a Swedish company,
Right.
and the Swedes, I think, is an interesting group because they kind of punch above their weight when it comes to technologies, particularly in the defense and security realm. So I was privileged to be able to work with all these technologies, and as I saw where they were applied in the littorals in Sweden, and how they were applied, and I noticed how the country and the company were trying to regain competency in technologies for the littoral environment. I connected that to the U.S. doing the same thing with its foray into littoral combat ships, and then came out here to see if we couldn't perhaps connect that in a combined effort.
So we had Dr. Wayne Porter on an earlier show, and he was, of course, the director of Littoral Operations Center, which means that you found a natural marriage between the interest of both the Swedish defense industry, or the Swedish people. Littoral operations are concerned in the U.S. Navy's return to that very complex environment, and your participation here. So what responsibilities do you have primarily with SAAB? Talk to a little less about that, and then tell us how that ties into your relationship and what we do with MPS.
Well, my responsibilities are primarily to work with the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement that exists within the Littoral Operations Center, to look at the technologies that are going to lead the way to conducting littoral operations with partners in a more effective way. So that's what I'm doing now. And primarily, and I'm living here with my wife, and we are enjoying this immensely.
Well, I'm going to get to those personal things here in a minute, because I always like to grab our guests and see what they like most about Monterey County. But tell us a little bit, what makes the littoral environment such an interesting environment to study or challenge when it comes to naval operations?
Well, I think more and more today, you're finding that there's an appreciation for the complexity that exists in this region.
So what makes it complex?
Well, I think the way I look at it is, you have, let's say, a straight shoreline.
Right.
And as you approach that shoreline from the blue water to the green, or even as you approach that shoreline from the hinterland to the shoreline, what you find is that that's where the human population is. Those are where the transactions occur. That's where the confluence of activity merges, and that complexity skyrockets.
Right.
So if you're going to operate there, if you're going to sustain operations there, you got to know, you got to have particular technologies that are, I think, suited for that environment. The Swedes went through this when they understood back in the 80s that their technologies were not suited for the littoral environment, which was their sovereign territory.
Right. So they lived that.
So the emphasis on blue water operations is important, but if the technologies don't work in the close-in, complex environments of the littorals, then you need to rethink things, and they did.
So you have mixings of waters, mixing of atmospheres, different sensor
phenomenology.
complexes. Right. Even the way in which conflict occurs is different in that region where you have the seashore balance. So you talked a little bit about Sweden rediscovering their littoral challenges and their sensors, and maybe talking about the tactics associated with that. I think the postgraduate school recognized that we needed to learn even from the smaller nation. But are all littorals the same around the world? And if not, then what do we do about it?
No, and I think that's the, that adds to the complexity.
Right.
Because the regions are different. And I like to use a phrase that Professor Hughes uses, which is maritime cul-de-sacs. You find these maritime cul-de-sacs around the world, and they're all different. All their geographies, their phenomenologies, their cluttered environments, and the capabilities that exist, the country's ambitions within those areas, all are different. So you have to go to each one to understand and work with those elements.
So the geopolitical, the cultural are just one more different type of complexity. I was referring to mainly the physical complexities in littoral.
Yes.
But in fact, the proximity of countries, the proximity of the common border of the maritime environment, and how those looked at each other. They differ everything from the Baltic down to Southeast Asia. So how do we gain an appreciation for those? Tell us about some of the activities that both SAAB and ONR and MPS Office of Naval Research and MPS participates in.
Yeah, so I think we started off with a fairly robust effort in the campaign analysis and wargaming. So
those two classes.
In classes that,
Right.
that you teach.
Right.
And I think that what we did was we took a specific region which we thought might be a controversial region, and of course the Baltics was the region, and the Swedes were most interested. And we went through a number of different campaigns and wargaming, tabletop wargaming evolutions with the students that are also international.
Right.
Then they bring bright young ideas to these tabletops and their operators. So we had some wonderful first couple of years where we were looking at what are the challenges going to be in the Baltic, and of course we've seen that kind of play out.
Right.
And some of the things that we recommended in the beginning filtered through, I think.
Well, and as you know, the Swedish National Defense University now sends a group of officers every year to play those scenarios and get the ideas from our officers. They exchange ideas, and we learn a lot from them. Now, tell us a little bit about the Optech program and what that does as far as giving an appreciation for these different cul-de-sacs that you referred to.
Yeah, so we thought that at one point that it would be a good idea to actually go out and evangelize this. So we established this thing called the Littoral Optech Workshop, and that's a series of workshops that are now going around the world. We started in Stockholm, and we handled basically the Baltic region 3 years ago. 2 years ago, we went to Tokyo, and we handled the China Seas. And just a couple of months ago, we returned from Cartagena, Colombia. We were looking at the Caribbean basin and the issues that exist there.
Now, these are the host countries, but more countries involved than just those
Oh,
countries.
absolutely. So it's a region, and we look at it that way, and invite those that have equities in understanding better how to operate and how to bring the technologies necessary to operate better.
So what is Office of Naval Research interest in this?
I think they like it because, and they have an interest in it because it brings out new conceptual ideas, early stage research ideas, and the differences that may exist between partners that may share the same borders.
Right.
And that perhaps where cooperative arrangements can be made, they can both secure and defend their littorals in a better way, in a more cost-effective way.
And how does the Naval Postgraduate School participate?
Well, they provide the intellectual capital for this.
Okay.
Dr. Porter and his Littoral Operations Center is key, and they lead the event when we're there. As there's about 100 people. We try to keep it intimate. And it starts with a strategic focus, bringing in senior leaders from the region to talk about their strategic objectives. And then we move into the operational or co-operational elements that are ongoing or that may be needed. And then we move into technological bins, if you will.
So is it always just the naval officers from the different countries, or
No.
is it a mix?
That's a mix. It's civilian research scientists. It's think tanks that bring their experts in, and it's those that are doing kind of the cutting edge work on these types of challenges.
And what are some of the future ones you have planned?
So it's growing,
I can
which is
understand
good.
it could be quite popularity.
The popularity is good, and we have discussions going on now for an Optech North, or taking an Arctic focus.
And where will you have that at?
Well, it's being bantered back and forth between Canada and Iceland.
Oh, okay.
But it is this
Let's
year
have
is,
that one in July.
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we're scheduling these things is sometimes difficult. So we're looking at like early April next year.
Oh, it's still cold up there.
Yeah, but you know, we have India is interested.
Is that right? In
yes.
Optech North, they're focusing on
No,
Arctic?
this is for another
Oh,
event.
for the next ones. Oh, sure.
Next event.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then an Optech we call Central, which would be in probably the Eastern Mediterranean.
Now, there must be a lot of synergy among the regions and contacts made during these as well. So there's, I'm going to use an economic term because some externalities that come out of these meetings that weren't originally planned as far as information exchange. For example, do we still maintain contact with many of the people that we have had past Optechs with?
Yeah, one of the common threads that's kind of grown through this, and I think Wayne, Dr. Porter will tell you this, is this maritime domain awareness thread. And I think that is a very significant piece that's flowing from this, and it's growing in other activities that stem from these connections that are made. Yeah.
Now, so we continue to do research in one way or the other, or return for instruction. I know that there are a lot of connections that were made for Indonesia, for example. We continue now that MPS actually does courses for them and enhances them as well.
I think this grows out of that engagement.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me ask you the business question here. Why is SAAB interested in these things?
Well, I think SAAB puts about a quarter of its revenue back in IR&D, and it's constant.
So what's IR&D mean?
Internal
Research
and development, which is unusual for a company to put that much in. But they are very forward thinking, and of course, this is a time of inflection. I think with all the significant, sophisticated technologies that are here,
right?
We're just slowly recognizing them as part of capabilities we would put into the military. I think SAAB recognizes that they need to be part of that discussion.
And that includes their relationship with the Naval Postgraduate School, is that right?
That's correct.
Or what is the value they see for that relationship here?
A high value for what they're concerned with is being able to be at the cutting edge of what the thinking is for the future, and of course with this international cadre of bright students and the professors, which are unique, I think, here, because it's very difficult to find a place that has a set of professors that are able to concentrate in a particular area in the military domain for so long and to understand how that's evolving.
Now we have about 30 seconds left. Tell us what your favorite activity in Monterey County is.
Favorite activity. So I like the wineries.
There we go.
It's very nice, and being near the water, being on the beach. The things that you can do here are immense. The music activities, the festivals. Last night 2 nights ago, I was over at the Panetta Institute for
one of
the lectures with Connie Rice and Ash Carter. I mean, you can just about go. Yeah, last night I was up at Stanford at one of us film screenings, and so I mean, you can do whatever interests you here. Those activities are at your disposal.
Well, Steve, you and your wife Michelle are wonderful contributions to our local community. Thank you very much for your service in the Navy and for being here on the show today in the YourTown television program. And we hope you join us for future shows in which we will highlight both faculty, students, and activities at the Naval Postgraduate School.